You've worked hard, saved diligently, and built a significant 401k, maybe even with a large chunk of your company's stock. But did you know that hidden inside that stock could be a major tax saving opportunity? It's called Net Unrealized Appreciation, or NUA. And today, we're going to dive into what it is, how it works, and how to use it to your advantage before it's too late.
Hello, and welcome back to Retire Stronger, the podcast where we simplify complex financial strategies so you can make smarter decisions with your money. I'm your host, John Foard, and with me today is my co-host, Bill Kearney. Say hello to everyone, Bill.
Hey, John, how you doing? What are we talking about today?
Well, Bill, we are financial advisors with a passion for helping executives and high-income professionals over the age of 40 prepare for retirement with confidence and control over their tax future, so they can retire stronger. And today, we're talking about a strategy that often flies under the radar. It's called Net Unrealized Appreciation, or NUA. And again, I think it's a very underutilized concept for individuals who have a lot of company stock in their 401k plan. And I know we're going to talk through that and give some examples. So why don't we let you just kick it off and tell everybody what NUA actually is?
Yeah, probably good if we get an opening definition here of NUA. I don't know how many people deal with this on a day-to-day basis. It does come across our desk quite often, something that we have to deal with. For folks who are employed and are receiving company stock, especially at points in time when they have to divest that company stock and figure out what their options are at that time. So NUA it's pretty simple. It refers to the difference between the cost basis of the employer stock held inside of the qualified plan, like your 401k, and its market value at the time of distribution. And just so we're not getting too technical here, cost basis is pretty simple to think about in terms of it's kind of like your starting point. It's what the stock cost when you received it, right? So cost basis is your starting point, and market value is your current point. What is the value now? It could be positive, it could be negative from what your cost basis was. So the question then becomes, well, why does any of this matter? Well, NUA allows you to convert part of your 401k into long-term capital gains instead of paying ordinary income tax on it later when you take distributions from the 401k, or if you've converted it to a traditional IRA. And this can mean thousands or potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings and tax over time. So let's break it down just so we can take a look at this. Imagine for just a moment here, you've been buying company stock inside your 401k for years, okay? Maybe your total investment or your cost basis is $100,000. But over time, the value of that stock has grown to over $400,000. If you follow standard 401k withdrawal rules in retirement, you'll pay ordinary income tax on the full $400,000 when you withdraw it.
Correct.
Potentially 35% or more, right? But if we utilize an NUA strategy, you might be able to pay income tax only on the original $100,000, and the remaining $300,000 in gains would be taxed at a long-term capital gains rate, which today maxes out at 20%, and it can even potentially be lower.
Yep.
So
All
that
depends on what tax bracket you fall into. Correct. Yep.
And that subtle shift there, it means a lot in savings or potential savings here as it relates to taxes. John, we got to stop for just a second, though, and give our normal disclaimer here. As we're giving numbers and giving examples, right, we are not providing specific tax or investment advice. These are just examples that we're using here. We certainly recommend you consult with a qualified tax professional, talk to your financial planner. But for now, just take this as information purposes only on what we're looking at here. Just trying to show you some examples of how you can look at what you have inside your account and potentially with options that you have on how you've received things, treat them in a different tax status, which could save you a lot of money over time. So the question then becomes, John, who should consider an NUA strategy? Is this for everybody?
Yeah, great question. And no, it's definitely not for everyone. And this is not an easy strategy to just, take a look at what you have in your account with your 401k plan and just go, oh, I've got company stock. This will work for me. There's a lot of planning that goes into this. And let's back up just a second as well and kind of talk through um, it- why you and I kind of came up with this topic today. Um, you know, where we live and where our headquarters is for our firm is in the greater Charlotte market, and we have companies in the area that are publicly traded companies that have large presences here. We could go through the list, but you've got companies like Lowe's Home Improvement or Lowe's Companies. I'm not sure what they go by now. And you've got companies like Microsoft that are here, IBM, Duke Energy, all big publicly traded companies with employees that own quite a bit of company stock within their 401k plan. And so a lot of times we get questions around this when we're dealing with our clients, doing financial planning for them. And once in a while, you have to consider a strategy like this because, again, it is a powerful strategy, but it's not for everyone. So, to your question, who should seriously consider it? Executives or long tenured employees with significant company stock inside their 401k plan. That would be an obvious one to think of. Individuals in a high income tax bracket now, but expect to stay high in retirement. That would be another one to consider. It goes back to what you mentioned before. I mean, if you execute this strategy appropriately and you have the means to pay the tax bill on when you execute the strategy, I mean, it means that you could possibly save thousands, tens of thousands, or over $100,000 potentially, depending on how much company stock you have. So, someone who's going to be remaining in a high tax bracket in retirement most likely would also be someone that would be a good candidate for this. Those individuals approaching retirement and planning a one-time withdrawal or rollover would be a good potential candidate. And anyone who wants to reduce future required minimum distributions by removing stock from the pre-tax 401k bucket. I mean, this could be huge. Go back to your earlier example. You have purchased $100,000 of company stock. It's grown to 400,000. When you exercise an NUA strategy effectively, you're removing $400,000 out of a bucket of money that $400,000 will now no longer be subject to required minimum distributions. Could be a great tool for that. The key, though, is that you must have appreciated employer stock inside your 401k, and you must be ready to make a lump sum distribution under very specific IRS conditions and rules. And we'll talk about those conditions in a moment. So I know, Bill, you came up with some pretty good points you wanted to make on how the NUA process works. So I'll let you kind of dive in, unless you want to add anything to what I just said.
Yeah, the other thing to think about as it relates to an NUA strategy is that this can also and likely will change what a potential Roth conversion strategy would look like for someone as well, because it will
100%.
change. Yeah, it could change how much is still in that pre-tax bucket, the tax deferred bucket. I don't know, John, could you remind me and the listener out there, have we done any podcasts on Roth conversions?
I think like 23 out of our 18 podcasts are about Roth conversions at this point. It's
Right.
obviously a tool that we talk about a lot. It's a tool that we discuss with our clients a lot. And um, I will tell you, though, that the surprising thing to most of our clients is that we will tell them and we will give them the disclosure that, hey, we love Roth conversions and we think they're a great tool for tax planning during retirement years, but there is a chance that it may not work for you and that it may not make sense for you to do a Roth conversion. And I think what you were alluding to here is if you fit into one of those scenarios where using the net unrealized appreciation concept And if it were to work for you, it's very likely that a Roth conversion might not even be necessary for you potentially. I think that was where you were going.
That's exactly right. And we joke from time to time about the Roth conversions. We do talk about it a lot, but we also only talk about it when it makes sense, and using specific tools to determine if it makes sense for people. But it is an extremely powerful tool, and this is a perfect area where before doing an NUA transaction, it might have made sense to do a Roth conversion, but now on the back end of it, perhaps it doesn't. Perhaps you're in a situation where you don't even have enough in the pre-tax bucket to take full advantage of standard deductions and other things that are available to you in retirement. So definitely this transaction would require a specific overhaul look at the tax situation moving forward, because it can have impacts on one end. So you might solve a problem in one area doing this. You might potentially open the door to another problem or another maybe miscalculation on the Roth balancing side of what your portfolio looks like. But I'll give you an example here of a basic NUA transaction that we see a lot. And you mentioned, basically who's eligible for this, John. Well, if they're eligible, how does it work? Well, for example, let's say that you retire or you have a separation from service and you take a lump sum distribution of your entire 401k in a single calendar year. Okay. The employer's stock portion is moved to a taxable brokerage account. It is not rolled over into an IRA, but the rest of the 401k funds are rolled into a traditional IRA. So we've now separated the funds out by type and by access point, if you will, into two different types of accounts. At this point, you pay ordinary income tax on the cost basis of the employer's stock, the original purchase price inside the 401k. So that's going to hit you in that particular calendar year from a tax standpoint. All right. You do not pay tax on the gain yet. When you eventually sell the stock, the unrealized appreciation is taxed at long-term capital gains rates. And the kicker with this, John, is that even if you sell the stock immediately, if you do all of this in the same transaction, the NUA portion is still eligible for capital gains treatment. It doesn't matter how long you hold inside or outside, I should say, the 401k. There is no holding period for that portion of it. I'm going to stop right there, let you throw some things on the pile here.
Right. So let's just go back to the original example. You buy $100,000 worth of company stock. It's appreciated to 400K. And let's say that the total value of your 401k at that point, when you separate from service or retire, let's say it's worth $1 million. You do a rollover, and $600,000 of that rollover will go to an IRA. It's a non-taxable event, and it goes into a traditional IRA. And the $400,000 of company stock will get moved to the brokerage account. I know you already mentioned all that. I just kind of want to set the stage visually for folks.
Yep.
So now you have this $400,000 block of company stock. Let's say you work for Microsoft. Now you have $400,000 of Microsoft in a taxable brokerage account. You mentioned this already, but I kind of want it to people to visualize what happens here. Now you've got a tax bill that has been created instantly for that year that you do it on $100,000 of ordinary income. And what the government is saying is if you do an NUA transaction here, we're going to collect the tax on the original amount that you purchased of that company's stock. So going back to our example, you have $400,000 of Microsoft stock. $100,000 of it is what you actually paid for it. That's the amount you bought it for inside your 401k. They're going to say, okay, we're going to add $100,000 to your tax bill or to the amount of income you've made for purposes of your taxes that you'll owe for that year. You'll pay ordinary income tax on that 100K. And then, like you said, Bill, you can hold this stock forever if you want to. You don't have to sell it. Or you could sell it a week later, 6 months later, 2 years later, no matter when. Now, at that point in time, whatever capital gains tax bracket you fall into, you will owe capital gains taxes on the $300,000 worth of gains. Now, Depending on when you sell it, if you wait 5 years, 10 years, if you wait 2 years, 6 months, if that $400,000 is now increased to 500 or 450 or whatever the number is, again, you're only paying capital gains taxes on the growth over and above the $100,000 that you invested. So I just kind of wanted to just paint that picture so people can visually or audibly kind of understand what that looks like. You have to be able to afford to pay that tax, that ordinary income tax on that 100,000 the year that you do this. And that's a very important piece to think about and to remember, because a lot of people don't realize, oh gosh, okay, I've got to have cash. I've got to have the cash to be able to pay this. And I'm not a huge fan. Bill, you feel free to chime in here. I'm not a huge fan of doing an NUA transaction if the client is going to be forced to sell that stock right away just to pay that tax bill.
No, you're right. There's actually a couple of strategies we can come back to before we get to the end here on, how to best liquidate the leftover stock from the NUA transaction. And sometimes it does make sense to liquidate a portion of it to pay the tax, that type of thing. We'll come back to that. I guess at the end would be a good way to do that. But I think for now, let's take a look at an example. Here, we've talked about who's eligible. We've talked about what a transaction looks like. Let's give you an example of what this looks like in practice. So the names have been changed to protect the innocent here. So this person we'll call Laura. She's a 62-year-old executive who's worked at her company for 30 years. Her 401k holds $1.2 million in total value. 400,000 of that is company stock, and her cost basis on the stock is just 100,000. We try to keep these numbers simple and rounded off for the purposes of following along while you're listening. She's retiring this year. If she rolls the stock into an IRA, she'll pay ordinary income tax on the full $400,000 when she withdraws it. But if
Correct.
she uses the NUA strategy here, she pays income tax only on the $100,000 basis right now, this year, and the $300,000 of appreciation is deferred. And when it's sold, its tax is capital gains. So this point in time is where a side-by-side comparison needs to happen, right? To figure out which way is better for her, considering all the rest of her assets as well. You typically can't do this in isolation and get a correct answer, but simple 4-letter word helps us figure out how to do this. It's math, right? We can put the two before and after scenarios together and figure out which way works better. So assuming that she's in a 35% income tax bracket and a 15% capital gains bracket, that could save her over $60,000 in taxes compared to that full IRA rollover. $60,000, right? That could be the difference between running out of money in your planning work and not running out of money through your retirement scenario, right? So that's a big deal. That's real money that you have to look at when you do the analysis here on that. That's just a simple real world example that we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of money. I can do a lot with 60K in my pocket that I didn't have to give to the IRS, and I know everyone listening to this feels the same way. So great example. So let's talk about let's move on and talk about the rules and traps to watch out for. Before jumping in, know that the IRS rules are very strict. So you must take a lump sum distribution of the entire 401k in one calendar year. So you cannot piecemeal this and break it up over multiple years or 2-year time frame or something of that nature. It has to the entire 401k has to be distributed or rolled over and to effectively capture this NUA concept or the ability to do an NUA transaction. The trigger event must occur, right? So what do we mean by a trigger event? Retirement, death, disability, or age 59 and a half. So one of those trigger events has to take place for you to be able to capitalize on the NUA opportunity. Again, the stock must be distributed in kind. You cannot sell the stock first inside the 401k and then do a distribution to capitalize on the NUA opportunity. So again, if you own $400,000 of Microsoft stock and another $600,000 of other investments within your 401k plan, you have to roll all of that $400,000 Microsoft stock holding into a taxable brokerage account as is, in kind. The shares of stock must be moved over in kind. You cannot sell them prior to moving it out of the 401k plan. And then again, to reiterate, you cannot piecemeal the distribution over multiple years. So those are some very strict rules. So let's talk about the downsides. So what are some potential downsides of this? Well, again, we've talked about this multiple times already. You're going to owe income tax on the cost basis in the year of the distribution, which could spike your tax bill. It could bump you into a higher tax bracket as well. So you got to make sure that you're doing this effectively and that it makes sense. And that's where a proper conversation with your CPA or tax planning professional needs to happen. The stock moves to a taxable account, so there's no more tax deferral. And that's something we haven't mentioned yet, but I wanted to make sure we did talk about that is, you've had tax deferral on the growth and if you own a stock that pays dividends, you've had tax deferral on all of that up until this point when you execute the NUA concept here. So you no longer have that. You lose that tax deferral. And then if the stock drops in value after the move, you're on the hook, right? I mean, you lose the benefit of what an NUA provides to you. So that's why it's essential to coordinate this strategy with your financial advisor and your tax professional. Cannot be more adamant about that. Timing, tax bracket, and your broader retirement plan all need to be considered. Anything you want to add to that, Bill?
No, I couldn't agree more with all of that, and it just goes back to there's no right or exact wrong answer to apply here. There's no necessarily rule of thumb here that you can utilize. It has to be analyzed to figure out what makes sense in the broader picture, right? But we mentioned this earlier, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about Roth conversions because people might be a little confused here as to what the difference is between this and a Roth conversion, right? So really, these two items serve different purposes. A Roth conversion is a strategy that spreads your tax liability over multiple years with the intent of trying to reduce future required minimum distributions and create some tax-free growth. Okay, so that's its own separate strategy here. The NUA is a one-time opportunity to convert capital gains from your future income tax, but it doesn't reduce your RMDs unless you remove a large portion from your 401k. So the way that they actually interact with each other is that the NUA transaction could reduce the need for Roth conversions later on. It could lessen the need to do Roth conversions later on, but that's just a case-by-case basis. In some cases, you can use both. You can do an NUA on the company stock and convert the rest of the 401k to a Roth over time. I don't know that I'd recommend removing all of your tax deferred money, but that could be a possibility in how you do it. That again, this goes back to the right mix, depends on your age, your goals, your income situation, the rest of your asset picture, and what your anticipated lifespan is. All of those things come into play here as far as that. But that's sort of the 10,000 foot view difference between the NUA and a Roth conversion strategy.
Yeah, I totally agree. Good points, all good points there. So I know someone out there is probably wondering if we're going to talk about whether or not you should sell the stock once you do the NUA transaction. And that is a great question. Bill, I'm glad you asked. Once the stock is in your taxable account, should you sell it? Well, that depends on two pretty big things here. We've kind of boiled it down to two things that it really depends on. And that is one is how much of your net worth is concentrated in that stock. And if you have a very large portion of your investable liquid net worth that you're going to depend on for supplemental retirement income, it might be an appropriate consideration to think about selling some of that stock. Maybe not all of it, but sell some of it, right? Number two, how do you feel about the future of the company? So that's a big one. We've had clients over the years who've said, "Look, I'm ready to get out of this stock now. I don't see very positive things happening with the company, which means I feel the stock price is probably going to uh, be under a lot of pressure and possibly move down. And I would rather cash in on my gains and on my earnings to this point and move on." So again, you may want to diversify gradually to reduce single stock risk, but doing so means triggering the capital gains. So again, you got to take that into consideration. And remember, even after an NUA transfer, your capital gain is locked in at the market value at the time of distribution, not future growth. And that's, I'll go back to the comment I made before: is if the stock loses value, you're kind of stuck. You still owe that capital gain. That's part of the deal. Bill, anything you want to kind of throw in
Yeah,
there?
definitely. I think you're kind of talking about this as single stock risk inside of a portfolio. Once these situations occur where things are now moved out and away from the company plan, and you have more access to make decisions on it, it is really time to take a look and determine what is my concentration in this company stock as it relates to the rest of my portfolio. Am I very sensitive to single stock risk? We all know of examples where a company has news come out and the stock takes a huge dive, right? You never know when things like that are going to happen. And as you said, if this is something you're dependent on for a good portion of your retirement assets, it's definitely something to consider. How do you do it? What is a method to do this? How do you know what to sell and how much to sell? Well, sometimes you don't, but there's a way to do this that we've utilized in the past. And if you've ever heard of the term dollar cost averaging, which is when you are taking a specific amount of funds and investing them on a regular basis, you could almost call this negative dollar cost averaging, where you set up specific intervals. Maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's once a year, and you say, I'm going to sell X% of this stock, regardless of what's going on with the stock, up or down. What that does is it helps you remove your emotional attachment to the stock, and or what you might call the greed quotient, where you're just continuing to watch this stock value go up. And I mean, it's to the moon, right? There's no other place to go but to the moon. Maybe not. So it allows you to remove the emotional component that you have in the attachment to that stock and start to strategically and responsibly liquidate those funds so that you can diversify them in your portfolio and prepare them for the next chapter of your life when you're going to need that money for income. So that's some strategies that we have utilized. Negative dollar cost averaging, I don't think that's a thing. I think that I've made that up um,
We've
completely out of
coined a
whole
new
cloth.
term.
Yeah,
We've
but when
coined a
you
new
when
term,
you
maybe.
when you talk about it with people, a lot of times they understand the concept of dollar cost averaging. That's putting money in. This is a way to dollar cost average that money out, and it helps you spread out the losses and gains inside of the transaction when you do it. So I'll leave it there as far as some simple strategies. There are others. You can certainly contact us or your financial advisor, to figure out different strategies on how to liquidate company stock.
Yep. Great. All great points there. So to wrap up, everyone, let's just kind of go through and hit the highlights here. So NUA, net unrealized appreciation, it can be a powerful tax tool, especially if you've built up significant company stock inside your 401k. The strategy offers a chance to pay capital gains tax instead of income tax on years of growth, but there are strict rules and potential trade offs. So this is not a DIY strategy. Cannot emphasize that enough. If you think NUA might be right for you, or you're not sure how to evaluate the opportunity, this is where an experienced financial advisor can make all the difference. Reach out to us here at Crown Advisors. You can call us at 704-469-0200, where we offer a complimentary assessment of your situation, and we're happy to have a chat with you. Or you can reach us at crownadvisorgroup.com. That's Crown Advisor with an OR group.com, where you can also click the button to schedule your complimentary assessment as well. We definitely look forward to hearing from you. If you like what you heard today, please hit the like button and follow us. Forward it on to your friends, family, or colleagues. We would appreciate that as well. And don't forget, folks, we specialize in helping Executives like you optimize retirement income, reduce tax burdens, and avoid costly mistakes. Let's take a look at your 401k. Let's run the numbers and help you build a plan that works for your goals, not the IRS's goals. Again, thanks for listening to Retire Stronger. Don't forget to subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Until then.